Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of Oxnard Planning Commission regular meeting for Thursday, July 15th, 2021. A quick housekeeping item. In accordance with Governor Newsom's Executive Order N-29-20, members of the commission and some staff will be participating via teleconference. As shown on the agenda and online, please email all written public comments to planning@oxnard.org. For those wishing to speak, may visit oxnard.org/city-meetings to fill out the speaker form or call 805-385-7878 by 2 p.m. the day of the meeting. For my colleagues, please use the raise hand feature when you wish to speak. Once you have been called on, please then click the hand again to lower. When making a motion or seconding, please clearly state your last name for the record. Because the meeting is electronic, all votes will be done by roll call. And as a reminder, immediately following our regular agenda, we will be moving into our subcommittee rules and procedures. And with that, Madam Secretary, if we can have the roll call, please.
Chair Chavez.
Here.
Vice Chair Orejo.
Here.
Commissioner Connolly.
Here.
Commissioner Meyer. Commissioner Meyer absent. Commissioner Nash.
Present.
Commissioner Sanchez.
Here.
Commissioner Erna Lopez. Lopez is absent as well. We have quorum.
Thank you. And please note that we just had Commissioner Meyer join us at this time. Before we move into our Pledge of Allegiance, I'm going to turn to Mr. Kolwitz for a quick announcement.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. So I wanted to point out a couple things for tonight's hearing. First and foremost, the voice you just heard was a different voice for all of you. That was the voice of Jessica Monteroso. Jessica has been the understudy of Dee for the Planning Commission, and tonight is her first night that we're letting her fly solo, if you will, with running the meeting from that seat. Dee's still here to support her, but we ask all of you to be patient with Jessica and to encourage her at the same time. So thank you for all of our collective efforts as we're building our team collectively. In addition, we also let Ken Roselle take a vacation for good efforts, if you will, that he's done. So we're joined tonight by Paul Early from the City Attorney's Office. Paul has a land use background in legal as well, a couple of decades under his belt. So we're in very good hands as we move through all things tonight. And Paul's on the camera right now. And if we do the meeting right, he does not get to speak unless he wants to. So we'll see how that goes. Paul,
thank you very much. Yes, thank you. It's an honor to be here tonight.
And then additionally, we're joined by Isidro, myself, and Assistant Chief Eric Stansegard as we move into different items on the agenda tonight. So with that, Chair Chavez, I'll turn the meeting back over to you.
Thank you and welcome everybody to our meeting. And good job for Ken for being able to take a vacation. I didn't know the city did that anymore, but I'm glad to see it happen. So we'll go ahead and move into our Pledge of Allegiance. And Commissioner Meyer, would you mind leading us tonight?
Absolutely. Please stand and put your hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Meyer. We'll now move into our next item, which is public comments on items not on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission regarding any item not on the agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission may do so at this time. The commission cannot take action on any items presented during public comments and will be referred to the commission secretary. All public comment speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comments for items not on the agenda?
We have one for Roxanne Trujillo, but she's not on with us at the moment.
Thank you. If Ms. Trujillo is to log on before the end of our meeting, we'll go ahead and honor her 3 minutes. So we'll go ahead and move into our next item, which is our consent agenda. Approval of minutes from our July 1st, 2021. Commissioners. Vice Chair Reckle.
Thank you, Chair. I move to approve the minutes as distributed.
Second from Steve Nash.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Nash. So it's been moved and second to approve our minutes from our July 1st, 2021 meeting. Madam Secretary, if we can have a roll call, please.
Vice Chair Arrojo,
Aye.
Commissioner Nash,
Aye.
Chair Chavez,
Aye.
Commissioner Connolly,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Abstain.
and Commissioner Sanchez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you for that. We'll now move into our ex parte declarations for public hearing items. Vice Chair Reckle.
None, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Connolly.
My apologies. I was listening to my 12-year-old. Can you repeat the question?
Ex parte.
Nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Meyer.
None for me, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Nash.
Yeah, I submitted some questions to the planning staff and they answered, and hopefully they'll give a brief summary during the hearing.
Thank you. Commissioner Sanchez.
And I did have, I did visit the site, and so I took a look over there.
Thank you. Was that for F1?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you. And no from myself. So we'll go ahead and move into our first public hearing item. F1, project name is the Peninsula Road Street Vacation General Plan Conformity. Planning and zoning permit number 21-625-02. A request that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution affirming that the city of Oxnard's vacation of a southernmost 272 feet of Peninsula Road and acceptance of the public access easement to allow for the continuation of vehicular circulation in the conformance of the city of Oxnard 2030 general plan. Our staff person on this is Isidro Figueroa, principal planner, and the recommendations are to find the project exempt from CEQA and to adopt the resolution 2021-XX affirming the city of Oxnard's proposed vacation of the southernmost 272 feet of Peninsula Road, fronting 3605 Peninsula Road, and acceptance of the public access easement. As a reminder to my colleagues and the public, staff's presentation was pre-recorded in accordance with Measure M and available on the city's website and YouTube channel. What I would like to do is turn to staff for just a quick summary and to provide any additional information that they deem necessary. Mr. Figueroa or Mr. Colwitz?
Chair Chavez, I'm going to start here quickly and then turn it over to Isidro to give the summary. I'm just jumping in here to let the commissioners know that Commissioner Nash did contact us with some questions. That's not necessarily something that's an ex parte communication because we're going to share all that information as well with the full commission here. So with that, Isidro will give the quick summary about public comments received as well as questions, and then share that broadly with the answers of those questions with the commission. So Isidro, anytime you're ready.
Thank you, Scott. Chairperson Chavez, members of the commission. There were a couple of correspondence received from the general public, and I'll go over them and give a short summation. One piece of correspondence was sent by Lorraine Efres, who supports the project. She references the cooperation agreement that was adopted by the City Council with the County of Ventura and identifies the project as one of the projects within the cooperation agreement. Another correspondence was received from the Harbor and Beach Community Alliance, which also supports the project. They do mention, they do have a concern about how the street vacation will be utilized in connection to a undisclosed high-density residential project at the harbor. Staff would like to identify that there is no project before the city that would call for an amendment to the local coastal program. Currently, that parcel does not allow for any residential, so therefore, if any project were to come forward that calls for any residential on that project, on that parcel, there would have to be a local coastal program amendment. And again, the city has not received an application for that. As Commissioner Nash had mentioned, he did forward some questions to staff regarding the project. One of the questions was in regards to the bicycle parking facilities. The project contains 4 parking facilities that include facilities for parking, storage. There is also a shower that will be provided for those who want to use bicycle for transportation to the project area. Another question was regarding the I'm sorry. Another question was regarding pedestrian, bicycle, bus, and other non-automotive means of transportation that have been encouraged by this project. There is a 10-foot wide boardwalk that is conditioned as part of this project. Also, a transportation demand management plan that calls for bicycle facilities to be installed, a shower, airport shuttle transportation to be provided by the hotel to its clients. Also, there is a item for the management to provide bus passes for employees. Another question was whether special conditions are guaranteed as part of this project. All conditions of approval are to be followed by the applicant. Any condition that needs to be amended would have to go before the Coastal Commission for review and approval of any amendments. And finally, there was a question regarding the lack of parking for clean air access, van pool vehicles, and electric vehicles. Again, this project was approved by the Coastal Commission based on its conformity with the Public Works Plan and also the county's parking requirements. That concludes the questions that were submitted by the Planning Commission. And one last item, again, just to focus on the project. The project itself, the hotel, restaurant, that has been approved by the Coastal Commission. That's not under the purview of this Planning Commission. What's before you, it's only the street vacation and it's conformity to the general plan. That concludes the brief summary, and staff is available for any questions from the commission.
Thank you for that, Mr. Figueroa. We'll now move to our commissioners if they have any additional comments at this time. Seeing and hearing none, we'll go ahead and open the public comment portion of this item. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comments for this item?
There are none.
Thank you. What I would actually like to do, because I see Mr. Mark Sandoval, who is the director of the Channel Islands Harbor, if my colleagues indulge me, if he wants to go ahead and just say a few comments on this particular item as it directly relates to him. Mr. Sandoval?
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I'm tuning in case you had any questions, but since you gave me the opportunity, I appreciate it. Obviously, I think that everybody in the county and the city are very supportive of this hotel project and are chomping at the bit to get it going. The street vacation issue seemed to be a nagging issue, but we were able to figure it out. The two attorneys' offices were able to figure out the path of the path that each agreed with, and your action here before you tonight is the city's part of that path, and then we'll take actions on the county's part. And so I do appreciate you supporting the recommendation and taking this one impediment out of the way to get this hotel redeveloped, which is long overdue and very anxious that we all get this done. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sandoval. So we will go to commissioners for our deliberation portion. Are there any comments from our commissioners? Vice Chair Ray.
Thank you, Chair. So for a vacation, I was pretty surprised at how voluminous the report was, but I appreciate it because I actually had no specific questions and all of them were answered in the report. For me, I was in particular reviewing the parking concerns that were brought up from other people. I was looking also at the bicycle infrastructure, tree planting, and pedestrian walkways. And in my opinion, the parking concerns have been addressed and mitigated. The bicycle infrastructure has been thought of and added to. The tree planting is well planned and the pedestrian walkways are integrated into future development. And I believe that approval of this vacation should be done because it will be in furtherance of these objectives, which not only is a win for the city, I believe also a win for the county, and we'll just add in the coastal also too. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Vice Chair. Any additional comments from my colleagues? I would just say that, you know, a couple of years ago, I participated in the Oxnard Chamber Leadership Academy. And one of those sessions was to visit the harbor. Mr. Sandoval was actually our tour guide back then. That was 2019. And we got to see the harbor and see how much needed help it needs, especially the hotel area. And, you know, the longer that we allow this to stay there, it creates more of a safety hazard for our public. And we want to ensure that we have safe areas as our residents and visitors are going through our beautiful city. So I can support this, and, you know, so thank you for this item. Commissioner Nash.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to add that my wife and I go to the Ventura Harbor quite often, and I am so looking forward to having the similar opportunity to visit the Channel Islands Harbor. And I think this will be a fantastic addition to the harbor community and to the into the greater community. So I'm very excited that we were able to get a pedestrian walkway around the perimeter of the site. And I anticipate a lot of pedestrian traffic and a lot of bicycle traffic. So it'll be, I'll remember the good old days, and it is a beautiful, fantastic location. So I fully support this.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner Nash. If there's no further comments on this, I'll be looking for a motion from my colleagues. Vice Chair Rickle.
Thank you, Chair. I move to find this project exempt from environmental review pursuant to California Environmental Quality Act Guidelines, Section 15061B3 and Section 15378B5, and adopt resolution affirming the City of Oxnard's proposed vacation of the southernmost 272 feet of Peninsula Road, fronting 3605 Peninsula Road, and acceptance of a public access easement is in conformance with the City of Oxnard 2030 General Plan, and recommending that the City Council order the vacation and accept a public access easement.
Thank you, Vice Chair Rejo. Is there a second? Commissioner Connolly.
I'll second Commissioner Connolly.
Thank you for that. It has been moved and seconded for the recommendation to approve this project and find the project exempt from CEQA guidelines, Section 15061B3 and Section 15378B5, and that we adopt a resolution 2021-XX affirming that the City of Oxnard's proposed vacation of the southernmost 272 feet of Peninsula Road, fronting 3605 Peninsula Road, and acceptance of the public access easement in the conformance of the City of Oxnard 2030 General Plan, and recommending that the City Council order the vacation and accept a public access easement. So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none. Madam Secretary, if we can have a roll call, please.
Vice Chair Rejo,
Aye.
Commissioner Connolly,
Yes.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Nash,
Aye.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes.
Chair Chavez,
Aye.
motion passes.
Thank you, and congratulations to both the city and the county for this project passing through.
Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and proceed to our next item, which is item F2, project name Firearms Ordinance Update. Planning and zoning permit number 20-580-05. A request to modify Oxnard City Code Chapter 16 pertaining to the permitting and development requirements related to the firearm ranges and businesses engaged in the sale of firearms and ammunition. The proposed modifications include adding medical clinics and hospitals as a sensitive use, requiring a 600-foot separation from businesses engaged in the sale of firearms and ammunition, and firearm ranges to the Oxnard City Code, Chapter 16, Article 2, Section 16-10, and Chapter 16, Article 5, Division 19, Section 16-540.1, Division 20, Section 16-504.2B. This is filed by the City of Oxnard Community Development Department. And once again, our planner on this is Mr. Figueroa. The recommendation is that we find the project exempt from CEQA, Section 1506C2 and 3, and 15061B3. Adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council approve planning and zoning permit number 20-580-05, adding medical clinics and hospitals as sensitive uses, requiring separation from establishing regulations to address firearm ranges and the sale of firearms and ammunition. We'll turn to staff once again for a quick summary and to disclose any questions that were submitted and comments from the public. And then after that, we'll turn to our Assistant Police Chief, Sansagar, for any comments as well. Mr. Figueroa.
Thank you, Chair Chavez, members of the commission. Staff did receive public correspondence and questions from the commission. I'll start with the public correspondence. We received an email of support from Troy Crowley, who references the importance of health, safety, and welfare to the community, and voicing support for this amendment. We also received an email from Lorraine Efres, who identifies the assurance of safety and security that patients seek for medical care at medical clinics and hospitals. Again, voicing support for the amendment. The staff report that you received contained a letter from Mr. Keith Lauterbach. Mr. Lauterbach's position is that the amendment is not necessary, and also points out to a project that he would like to bring forward to the city. That letter was included again as part of your packet. We did have some questions from the commission. One of the questions was whether any other city in the county of Ventura identified medical clinics and hospitals as sensitive uses. And based on staff's research to this day, we did not find any city that did include medical clinics and hospitals as a sensitive use. There was a question about police response and if staff had any data on response time and any event that had previously occurred. Staff did not have any data, but there have been instances where a retail store was burglarized and there was an evacuation. That was back in the early 2000s. Also, typically when there is a situation, and usually it's associated with someone barricading themselves in their homes or a domestic violence situation, there is a large police response. Sometimes there's evacuations, or sometimes there are shelter-in-place orders. Again, Assistant Chief Eric Sansagar is here, and he would be able to address any other concern or question that the commission might have on the subject. There was another question in regards to whether there's a legal threshold in terms of any to determine if the inclusion of medical clinics and hospitals as a sensitive use would provide for a legally sufficient number of parcels to accommodate the uses at this time. Again, there is no threshold. One of the things that we looked at was our baseline. We started off with 1.5% of the land area in the city allowing these uses without medical clinics and hospitals. If you were to include medical clinics and hospitals, you would then have 1.19% of the land in the city available for these uses. So you have a drop to 0.38. Additionally, there's 4 existing firearm retailers. There's 3 that are outside the city. Therefore, there's 7 that are available for the community. So based on that, legal feels that there is no issue if this amendment were to be adopted. And finally, there was a question in regards to whether 3 out of the 4 firearm retailers currently in existence would be legal non-conforming if the proposed amendment went through. Currently, again, we have 4 firearm retailers. 3 out of the 4 currently are legal non-conforming. If this amendment were to pass or be adopted, I should say, those 3 would remain legal non-conforming, and the 4th remaining one, their status would not change at this point. There were 2 more questions from the commission. One question was in regards to medical clinics. One of the questions was whether a business such as Quest Diagnostics, which draws blood samples from patients, would be considered a medical clinic. And the answer is no, it would not be considered a medical clinic. And then whether spas that handle that, if spas would be in wellness centers who are not considered medical clinics, would be able to handle clients that might have experienced gun violence or trauma. Again, spas and wellness centers are not medical clinics. They're like any other commercial institution that would treat any individual that obviously would pay for a service. And that concludes the questions from the Planning Commission. Staff is available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Figueroa. Chief Councilguard, is there any additional information you want to provide before I open it up for questions from the commission?
Thank you, Chair Chavez and other planning commissioners. You know what, Isidro covered most of the input that I had provided back to him. I would just add that from police department's perspective, obviously, we don't generally get like in the weeds to these matters when it comes to these firearm stores. Very, very few calls for service or any activity generated by them. But as Isidro referenced, if there was to be any activity or any type of critical incident at a location where there's, you know, dozens or hundreds of firearms, obviously it would bring with it a heightened response and would cause, you know, pretty large scale evacuation. So that's kind of the input that I provided back to Isidro. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We'll now open it up for questions from the commissioners to either Assistant Chief Councilguard or our city's planner on this. Any questions? Vice Chair Rick.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. So I'll just, not that it's needed for the record, but I was the one who asked staff the first 4 questions that were summarized nicely for the Planning Commission just right now. And so although I appreciated, I greatly appreciated the response to my questions, I'd like to ask a little bit more specificity. I'm not necessarily gonna ask a question, but it could provide a response to my own comments. And so, you know, the reason I was asking what, if any, other cities or the county had in regards to a similar ordinance is I, in general, understand in regards to the safety precautions, and I am not opposed to the baseline of the recommendation put forward to the Planning Commission. I am, however, concerned more on the legal lines and partially on the economic, that the buffer might be a little too broad and expansive And so that's why I was asking in regards to what the police response, if any, were to in regards to this, and if it would indeed make it any safer. And I would just like a little bit more clarity, the differences, because I do see one between having a 600-foot buffer for hospitals and 600-foot for medical clinics. And, obviously, as a previous staff member on another city, obviously different state, different county, but there were concerns on an ordinance that was brought up to the city that I was working on in regards to whether
Vice Chair
there would be.
Verhel.
Yes.
I apologize, but at this time, we're only doing questions. So if you have a question for staff or for PD, this would be that time. Otherwise,
Acknowledge. I apologize, Chair. I'll make it now. To the police, what was the actual evacuation or shelter in place zone in regards to that large scale incident in the 2000s? And to the Assistant City Attorney Paul Early, are there any legal requirements that we should be aware of, even though there's no constitutional violation or no Second Amendment right to sell firearms? Thank you, Chair, and I apologize for going into that narrative.
no problem. So we'll start with Chief Sonsegard with your first question, then we'll move into Mr. Early.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Chavez. So that incident that I referenced earlier involved a sporting goods store that used to be in the 400 block of West 5th Street. It's you're probably familiar with that area now. It's just south of Plaza Park. And there was a sporting goods store that had been burglarized. And at that time, there were suspects inside, and they had a large amount of like rifles and handguns that the sporting goods stores sold. And in an instance like that, that would again require a large scale response, probably at least one block evacuation and or a shelter in place if you're not able to get people out of there. So, and you had heard Isidro earlier reference something that I had shared with him, that while we don't generally respond to these firearms retail outlets very often at all, and I mean, problems at them are very few and far between. They're analogous to other instances or places in the city that we respond to where there's somebody like with a gun. And unfortunately, we have lots of those situations in Oxnard. And I know myself responded to a call in late 2019 on South Victoria Avenue, where a young man was shooting out of his apartment complex. And that when you have something like that, we are going to do a large scale, several blocks, because you don't know the capacity of the weapon that the person has and how far they could inflict damage by firing it. So I just bring that up to say that particularly with these firearm retail outlets, there's just like a lot of unknown. And so the police response is going to be, is kind of going to have to be large and over the top until we are able to determine like what the problem actually is.
Thank you for that, Chief. We'll go to the Vice Chair's second question, that was to our City Attorney.
Thank you, Paul Early, Assistant City Attorney. Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair, members of the Commission. With respect to the legality issues surrounding this, you may be familiar with buffer zones in another context and the constitutionality of them. Typically, it's with adult uses, bookstores, and dancing establishments. However, there's a distinct difference between those and this, in that the constitutional protections with regard to those businesses go to the business themselves. The First Amendment rights belong to the adult bookstore owner or the dance club establishment. So we have to be careful about making sure that we allow spaces for them to go. In this context, the Second Amendment protection belongs to the citizenry, the buyer in this case, and not to the seller. So there's no constitutional protection that says they have a right to have a place to sell firearms. Therefore, the city's concerns should be on a legal basis is there
a reasonable opportunity for a person to go buy firearms near where they live. And in this case, having 4 establishments in city, and as I understand it, several that are close by in the county or neighboring jurisdictions, we feel comfortable that from a legal standpoint, this proposed action won't create any constitutional issues.
Thank you to both. Chair Chavez, I did have one follow-up to Assistant Chief Sonstergaard. Just for the record, when you said that you had to evacuate several blocks, a block is how many feet? Just so I can put into context in regards to the proposal in front of the Planning Commission.
Sure. Vice Chair, I've learned a long time ago to stay in my lane, and I think a planner is more well prepared to answer that question than I am. So I don't know. I could probably make a guess, but yeah, I don't even want to say. So I don't know if Isidro might be able to add something.
Thank you. Yes, and if anyone from the staff could just, for the record, how many feet is a typical block, or more specifically, around 400 block of West 5th Street?
Google says 100,000 square feet, but I'm not sure about specifically about 5th Street.
Thank you very much, Mr. Figueroa. Thank you, Chair. That's all the questions I had of staff. I'll keep my comments as you recommended to the deliberations.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any additional questions to PD or staff? Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I guess a question perhaps for staff in relation to the letter from the business proprietor. I couldn't find his letter. Was it Lautenbach? In any case, he had a concern regarding finding a location for like a shooting range, multi-function gun store, etc. That was, I guess, 580 feet from the nearest use. And so my question is that something that we'd want to enable some level of discretion on in terms of if the difference is so minute? Or is it something where that would be a business of concern that the city would not be looking to exercise discretion beyond what we're planning right now?
City staff.
Commissioner Meyer, thank you for the question. City Council gave direction to staff, which was just to look at the inclusion of medical clinics and hospitals. It did not offer us any opportunity to amend any other aspect of the ordinance that was recently adopted back in 2019. At this point, if the commission feels that they would like to open that up for discussion, that will be something that will be done amongst yourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer.
And Chair Chavez, this is Scott Kolwitz as a disembodied voice. Wanted to jump in here for a quick second to address Vice Chair Alejo's linear distance question. Looking at some maps online, there isn't a predefined definition about how long city blocks are to be. Depending on the age of a neighborhood, the size, both depth as well as width of lots change, and therefore the size of blocks that contain those lots will change as well. But as we look downtown, it looks like the average kind of north-south width of our streets, the linear width, is about 500 feet, if that helps, from one intersection to the next. And that's
Thank you, Mr. Florence.
A broad statement, because the size of the blocks in downtown do have some differences depending on which one we're measuring. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for that, Mr. Colwitz. We'll go to Commissioner Sanchez. Commissioner Sanchez, I believe you're on mute.
Thank you. Okay, so just for the record, the letter that Commissioner Meyer referred to is a letter that was submitted by Keith Lauterbach, Lauterback. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further questions of staff or PD? Seeing and hearing none, we'll go to the public comment portion of this item. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comments for this item?
Yes, Keith.
Okay,
Keith.
Good evening.
you have 3 minutes.
Does everyone hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. Listening to all of the information that was exchanged between the police chief and Mr. Isidro, and again, I bring up the question of the possible business that I am trying to bring into the city. My biggest question would be, since it is such a minor amount of distance between your 600 feet and the 580, and this being, if I'm not mistaken, the closest facility was a urology lab, would that be constituted as a medical clinic?
So, Mr. Lauerbacher, the staff can't respond to you at this time, so you can go ahead and ask additional questions, and then once your comments are done, we'll go ahead and have staff respond.
That would be my biggest question, because if that's not considered or labeled as a medical clinic, then I would be able to proceed and bring this project to the city. So I guess that would be the only question that I would be worried about, because if it's not considered a clinic or a sensitive use situation, then my questions would be answered already.
Thank you. Is that the end of your comments?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So then we'll go ahead and turn to staff if they want to go ahead and respond to the question that was posed by Mr. Lauterbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff is going to be really careful here because obviously Mr. Lauterbach is referring to a particular project that he's interested in, and I don't want to cause an issue where one of you could jeopardize yourselves if this project were to come forward. And I also don't want to create a bias if it does come forward to the city as a staff member. What I can tell you is that the general location of where St. John's Hospital is at and the freeway in between, there's a number of medical facilities that include clinics that we've researched and looked at. And specifically to our urology lab, we would have to look at the actual lab itself, whether it's a clinic or just a lab like we mentioned before, like Quest, where it just draws blood. So staff is not comfortable specifically answering the question that was posed, but I could tell you that in terms of generalities, there are a number of medical institutions within that general vicinity. So any application or any inquiry, we are more than happy to look at and research for Mr. Lauterbach.
Thank you for that, Mr. Figueroa. If my commissioners indulge me, Mr. Figueroa, just a quick question. What is determined to classify a place as a clinic? Is it the fact that individuals seek medical attention from a doctor, a waiting period? Because I know it was mentioned that if they're getting blood drawn, that it may not be considered a clinic. So if you can just put that on the record, please.
Sure. If you reference the staff report, which is page 7, page 3 of that staff report, and you look at the definition, medical clinic means an organized outpatient health facility that provides direct medical, surgical, dental, optometric, podiatric advice services or treatment to patients who remain less than 24 hours, and they may also provide diagnostic or therapeutic services to patients. Again, one thing is going into a clinic for psychiatric services, eye exams, typical medical procedures and so forth. And another is a pharmacy where you just go in and, get a prescription, or somewhere like Quest where you draw blood. And so obviously that's our guiding light, is based on that definition that I just read to you.
And if I could jump in there for a quick second, I agree with what Isidro said. In the staff report, we continue with some discussion that says the definition is not intended to include land uses such as, but not limited to, which are found in the Oxnard City Code. And we list out specifically medical insurance and medical services, retail medical equipment and supplies, pharmacies, medical research and laboratories, medical devices, equipment and hospital supply manufacturers, ambulance services, veterinarian services, and spa and wellness services, or spa and wellness centers, if you will. While we included that in the staff report, I do want to point out that we did not put that the nots in the definition itself. The Planning Commission, the question that we have before all of you tonight essentially is, as we're thinking about medical clinics and hospitals, did we get the definition right? So we'll go ahead and toss that out for all of you to consider as we're thinking about these things.
Thank you, Mr. Kolwitz, and thank you, Mr. Figueroa, for just putting that definition out there for the public. And I apologize, Madam Secretary, did we have any additional public comments?
No, they're not with us.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So we'll go ahead and move to the commissioners for the deliberation portion of this public hearing. And I turn to see if anyone has any. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Again, apologies for launching into deliberations in the question portion. So I'd like to thank Assistant City Attorney Early in regards to the legal questions I had. Actually, that was extremely helpful in regards to my knowledge of what buffer zones could and could not do constitutionally, and I'm glad you brought up the differences in between dancing adult bookstores and with the firearms situation that we have here before the Planning Commission. The situation I was involved in had to deal with dancing, and I'm glad that you made that distinction, and so thank you for that. In regards to the police, I was asking in regards to if the 600 foot is too much, overly broad, and the fact that there were a couple of situations, specifically the one initially noted on the 400 block of West Fifth Street, including several blocks, and with it noted that a block is approximately 500 feet. So I give that 5 blocks, 2,500 feet, 600 feet is definitely within that area. I had an amendment plan just based before the meeting, but obviously I look to the staff and my other Planning Commission members in regards to whether amendment is needed. I have narrowed the scope of what I'm thinking, but I am going to be intently listening to my fellow planning commissioners when and if that motion is made, if an amendment should be done. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Additional comments from the other commissioners? Seeing and Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I was curious and would invite deliberation from my fellow commission members, as well as, of course, staff, in regard to the question around we're creating a rough 600 foot boundary, a buffer zone, and a business arises that would be 580. And in terms of looking at not wanting to be so overly prescriptive as to cause almost like a technical cutback in a situation like that, where it may be difficult with roughly 1% of space available for a business of that sort to operate. I'm just trying to get clarity, I guess, as more of a citizen than anything, around how do we make these kinds of decisions something that brings in a factor of consideration and discretion where possible.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. Any additional comments from the commission? Commissioner Connolly?
I read staff's definition of medical clinic and hospital, and though I think it's very good, I still think that there's things that need to be clarified, like would a medical clinic be considered a long-term health care facility, like a nursing home, like a spa and wellness center that they did bring up that does medical procedures? Would it be just where a doctor needs to be present? Would it be just where a nurse or a nurse practitioner would need to be present? I feel like we need to work on the definition, because when businesses do propose that their business is within the 600-foot range, if this does pass, I think it's still kind of a gray area on the definition of medical clinic. And then we can still go into mental health and the definition of that too. So that's my comment on the definition.
Thank you, Commissioner Connolly. Commissioner Nash? Commissioner Nash, you're still muted.
So I was. Thank you, Chairman. I think that if you reread the background report, it was pretty clear what the City Council intended this zone text amendment to be. They didn't get caught up in, whether it was a certain, a 20-foot deviation from the 600 feet. They voted for this amendment, and I think it's a little presumptuous of the Planning Commission to second guess their study deliberation from the July 2nd and July 16th.
2019.
To question 2019 to question their decision. So I suggest that we trade carefully here. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any additional comments? I will just say that in line of what Commissioner Nash was talking about, the City Council, I believe myself and Commissioner Nash, we both probably attended those meetings when this item came up, when the City Council was discussing buffer zones. And there was a wide range of different opportunities for buffer zones. And City Council, to my knowledge, was that 600 was kind of like a safe zone, that it wasn't too restrictive, but it also be able to provide that protection to the community. Although the incidents, as mentioned by our Assistant Chief Sonsegard, are not extremely common, where incidents like that one took place, we want to also ensure that it doesn't happen. So we don't want to give it that leeway. I'm in support of the 600 simply because City Council already went through a first and a second reading on the buffer zone. All we're doing is adding these two sensitive areas to the city code. We're not creating anything new. We're just adding it. We're determining, do they fit to be placed in the group. So I'm in support of this. But again, I'm only one vote on a 7-member body. So I look to the commissioners. Each commissioner had an opportunity during deliberations to speak. So if there's additional comments from other commissioners, you may do so at this time. And if there's no further questions, comments, or deliberation, we'll be looking for a motion.
Mr. Chairperson Chavez, this is Isidro here. Just to address a couple of concerns here. Commissioner Conley, in terms of a nursing home, that's already included in the non-residential daycare for adults. So that's already a sensitive use. In terms of the Quest diagnostics, we could make, if the commission wanted to deliberate on including labs where a patient goes in to get blood drawn out or just picks up a result, that could be something that could be of consideration. And also during the 2019 firearms update during the Planning Commission review, originally the buffer zone was proposed at 500 feet, but the Planning Commission amended that to be 600 feet. So that was looked at. It was actually low. It was a lower number, but the Planning Commission at that time recommended it to the City Council that it be increased to 600 feet. So just giving you some historical background there as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that information, Mr. Figueroa, and I stand corrected and who determined that distance. Commissioner Nash.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. If I may, I'd like to move that we approve staff's recommendation with no amendments.
Is there a second by Commissioner Sanchez? It's been moved and seconded to find the project to be exempt from CEQA sections 15060C2 and 3 and 15061B3. Adopt the resolution 2021-XX recommending that the City Council approve planning and zoning permit number 20-580-05, adding medical clinics and hospitals as sensitive uses, requiring separation from establishing regulations to address firearm ranges in the sale of firearms and ammunition. Is there any deliberation on that motion? Vice Chair Rejo.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. So just, I really was intently listening to my fellow commissioners, and I believe a distinction, at least in my opinion, was made between hospitals and medical clinic. Again, I am in support of the motion in general, but if I could give it a grade, I wouldn't necessarily give it 100%. And in pursuit of looking still at the safety concerns, but also that's not overly broad and inhibitive of any other businesses that we may or may not want, I move to amend the buffer distance of the medical clinic from 600 feet to 400 feet.
Thank you, Vice Chair Rejo. Is there a second for the amendment motion? Seeing and hearing none, the amendment motion dies on the floor. Is there any additional deliberations on the main motion to move the approval of staff's recommendation? Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. In regard to Vice Chair Rejo's amendment, my feeling was more towards the originally deliberated 500-foot buffer that the Planning Commission at that time had discussed. So if I may, I would like to propose an amendment to change the buffer from 600 to 500.
An amendment motion by Commissioner Meyer to change the buffer zone from 600 to 500. Is there a second on that motion? Vice Chair.
Commissioner Arwejo, or Vice Chair Arwejo, seconds.
It's been moved and seconded to reduce the buffer zone from 600 to 500. Is there any deliberation on that amended motion? Seeing and hearing none. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call vote on the amended motion?
Chair Chavez, this is Scott Kolwitz. If we can get a quick clarification on this one. The buffer that we're talking about right now, is that for all uses, making it from 6 to 500? And the reason why I'm asking for the distinction is when Vice Chair Arwejo made his motion, it was specifically for medical clinics. So I think that's an important thing for us all to collectively understand.
Commissioner Meyer, can you provide clarification to staff?
Thank you, Chair. So, Mr. Kolwitz, is this a matter that is either all sensitive uses or none in terms of how we are moving forward, or the decision that we're making right now?
I'm just looking for clarity. The Planning Commission, it would be your collective motion to make. The way that the ordinance is currently structured is that of all of the sensitive uses that are identified in the code, it's 600 feet from the property line of the sensitive uses to the building, which would have the firearms related business in it, whether it's retail or firearms. So it doesn't make distinctions between one sensitive use and another. So if your motion is just to change it unilaterally from 600 feet to 500 feet while also adding hospitals and medical clinics, we're just looking for that clarification. Additionally, I don't think this came up at all, but just since we're speaking of this and looking for clarity on the record, there is a buffer in the code that also talks about a 200-foot separation from one firearm business to another firearm business. And I don't think you're looking at changing that whatsoever, but I'm just looking for clarity at this point.
Yes, Mr. Kolwitz, that's correct. I wasn't looking to change the 200-foot buffer. And so I guess it could be a point of discussion whether it would be more effective and in terms of consistency to make it for all sensitive uses rather than separating out medical clinics and hospitals as a 500.
So staff, correct me if I'm wrong, and just for Commissioner Meyer, so staff is looking to determine clarification to your motion. Your amended motion is to reduce the buffer zone from 600 to 500. And does that include the medical and hospitals in that motion?
Chair Chavez, that's a correct summary of what our question was.
Okay, so Commissioner Meyer, does that include the two additional sensitive uses that are before us?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so that would include those sensitive uses.
Staff, is that sufficient?
Yes. So the way that we're drafting the motion that has now been seconded, and we're going to make sure that the seconder also agrees or sustains their second. But the way that we're hearing it is 600 feet to 500 feet for all sensitive uses related to firearms that are currently in the code, plus medical clinics and hospitals as defined with the proposed language.
Vice Chair Reho, do you sustain your second?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm using the strict definition of what I believe a second entails in parliamentary procedure, in that I'm just looking for a discussion. And at this time, I am not saying that I agree or disagree with the amendment on the floor. And so I still hold my second and would like to discuss. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion and the second still continue to stand. Further discussion on the amended motion will go to Commissioner Nash.
Thank you, Chairperson Chavez. The speaking on the amended motions, it seems to me that we're exceeding our task that was presented to us by changing the buffer zone. As I stated earlier, I think this is in disagreement with what the city council has already decided. And I'm curious as to whether these amended motions would have even been presented if we had not had the letter from Mr. Lauterbach. It seems the motions seem specifically catered to appeasing his desire to start a business at the location he mentioned. So these are concerning matters to me that were exceeding our authority, and that concludes my statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the amended motion presented by Commissioner Meyer? Vice Chair Rejo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So even though I seconded, I am actually I plan to vote against the amendment because I was specifically in my original amendment not seconded to make a distinction between hospitals and medical clinics, believing that medical clinics do not need as an extensive buffer. And in regard to Commissioner Nash's comments, I do agree in part that we are exceeding by proposing a 500-foot separation for all sensitive uses. And I disagree in regards to that we're catering to business. I think we're looking at the future of the city, and as the Planning Commission, we are making a recommendation. And so the City Council will take our recommendation, and as they approve the actual language, the original, I believe the original action by City Council was to ask staff what to do, ask Planning Commission to review. And so I think that we're doing our due diligence in reviewing the material. And so I plan to vote against the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Is there any additional, Commissioner Meyer?
Thank you, Chair Chavez, and I appreciate the comments of my fellow commissioners. Regarding the legality or whether we're overstepping our bounds or not, I generally would rely on staff and our council to keep us within bounds in regards to that. What I see is a sense of relative arbitrariness in regards to choosing an amount of feet, whether it's 600, 500, 400. It's not a matter that relates to a specific result based on a certain number of feet leading to reduced crime or a certain number of feet leading to increased crime. So just as the previous Planning Commission had deliberated upon this and provided an arbitrary change to the number for reasons that I'm not aware of, I felt it was within reason to suggest that we might return to what was originally discussed. We can all have differing opinions about that in that regard, but that is my position on that. And yeah, looking towards the future of the city and not bringing down, not using tools that perhaps would be too heavy-handed that can actually be counterproductive going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments on the amended motion? Mr. Figueroa, just a quick question in relations to Commissioner Meyer's amendment motion. You stated that the previous Planning Commission had recommended the 6, City Council had proposed or heard the 500. Do you recall the reasoning behind the increase from the 5 to 600?
Yeah, Commissioner. Thank you, Chairperson Chavez. Unfortunately, I was not the planner I came up with this during a review of the city council staff report when I inherited this project, but unfortunately, I don't know the reasons for, or the reasons for increasing the buffer zone.
Chairperson Council Chavez, if I could jump in here for just a quick second. What was clear is staff went in with an original recommendation of 500 feet. By a unanimous vote of the Planning Commission, it had been increased to 600 feet. And then the City Council acknowledged and accepted the 600 feet unanimously as well. But as far as the finer details and intricacies of why the change, that we don't have that at our fingertips right now.
I appreciate that. That's the challenges with when we don't have the old guard still around. Okay, is there any further discussions on Commissioner Meyer's amended motion? Seeing and hearing none. Again, it's been moved and seconded by motion by Commissioner Meyer, seconded by Vice Chair Rejo, to reduce the buffer zone from 600 to 500 feet and to include medical clinics and hospitals as sensitive uses. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call, please?
Okay. Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Vice Chair Rejo,
No.
Commissioner Connolly,
No.
Commissioner Nash,
No.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes.
Chair Chavez.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and move back to the main motion to approve staff's recommendation. It was moved by Commissioner Nash, seconded by Commissioner Sanchez. Is there any further deliberation on that motion? Seeing and hearing none. Madam Secretary, if we can have a roll call on that, please.
Vice Chair Rejo,
Aye.
Commissioner Connolly,
Yes.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Nash,
Aye.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes.
Chair Chavez.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you for that. And we'll see what City Council does with it after. We'll go ahead and move into our next item, which is G, study sessions and reports, although it's not listed there, but I turn to our subcommittee chair, Vice Chair Rejo, for any report outs.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I'd just like to give a brief preview that as the chair of the subcommittee, I thank the work and the time in regards to yourself, Chair Chavez, and Commissioner Connolly, and all the staff that has stayed with us after the full Planning Commission meetings. And so hopefully we are efficiently, I believe, getting to a conclusion to present a report to the full Planning Commission. However, at this time, I can report that the subcommittee requests that the Planning Commission Rules and Procedures Bylaws Subcommittee report out to the full Planning Commission by August 19th instead of the original motion of August 5. I'm asking for unanimous consent for this proposed motion from the subcommittee, or whatever the pleasure is of the chair to make have a vote on this. Thank you very much, Chair.
Vice Chair Rejo, if you can just make that a motion and then we'll do a regular vote.
Acknowledged. Mr. Chair, I move that the report of the Planning Commission Rules and Procedures Bylaws Subcommittee report out its findings and recommendation to the Planning Commission and change from August 5, 2021 to August 19, 2021.
Is there a second on that motion? Commissioner Connolly?
Second.
It's been moved and second that the subcommittee rules and procedures change its report out date from August 5th to August 19th. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing and hearing none. Commissioner Connolly?
I just wanted to let the rest of the commission know that we've done a ton of work on this and we're pretty close to the end. As we discussed in our previous meeting, we would need to present you a draft copy by our next meeting on the 15th. We're almost there, but we're not quite there yet. We went into the 11th hour last a couple weeks ago, and I think we'll be able to wrap stuff up today, but we want to present you guys a really nice, clean copy. So it's just another couple weeks till we get you something really clean and nice.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing and hearing none. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Vice Chair Arrejo? Commissioner Connolly?
Yes.
Commissioner Meyer?
Yes.
Commissioner Nash?
Aye.
Commissioner Sanchez?
Yes.
Chair Chavez?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. So report out for that will be on August 19th from the Rules and Procedures Subcommittee. We'll go ahead and move on to item H, Planning Commission business. Commissioners, any comments or reports? Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I wanted to thank the members of the bylaws subcommittee for your time and efforts on this task. I imagine that it can sometimes be seen as a thankless task, but I know that we'll be very appreciative of learning of the results of your efforts and deliberating on those. Secondly, I wanted to let the commissioners know that actually there was, I believe it's currently ongoing, a panel held by CAUSE, the Central Coast Alliance for United for a Sustainable Economy, in regards to how to incorporate environmental justice into city general plans and related matters around environmental justice. So while this conflicted with our meeting, this panel will be recorded, and I will keep staff and my fellow commissioners notified of when that would be available for those that would be interested in viewing it.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. Vice Chair Arrejo.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. For another organization that I'm part of, the California State Association of Parliamentarians, I believe the Planning Commission is probably the only other body other than my family that would appreciate this, but I was reelected as treasurer for the southern area of the California State Association of Parliamentarians. And so I'm hoping that I can use some of the knowledge, obviously, from that body to here and vice versa. So I appreciate all the real world knowledge I'm gaining, and hopefully I can bring that in still to the subcommittee and as we go on moving forward the planning commission. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Nash.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. Two things that I want us, via the planning commissioners and the public, to weigh in on. One, the county is soliciting comments for the SCR1 levy. That's a Santa Clara River one levy. Things such as, do you want it to be a more natural levy? Do you want it to incorporate a bicycle and pedestrian path on top? Or are you just happy having it, be a dirt mound, basically? So there's also the I believe it's the American Recovery Act money that the city is receiving, $59.5 million. There are a number of items that impact all of us. I submitted a letter, and I hope everyone listening does also. If you want, we all have priorities, and this is a one-time amount of funding that won't be available anytime soon. So really, that's what I would wish to share with the commission and the public.
Thank you, Commissioner Nash. Is there any additional comments? Commissioner Connolly.
I just wanted to congratulate the city of Oxnard and our fire chief in going to Florida to help out with the recovery mission. It was great to see the city of Oxnard in the news positively on such a negative event. So thank you, fire chief and his family and staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Connolly. Any additional comments? I would just say that, as we progress moving forward, well, let me just start by saying this past week, we've had some terrible incidents occurring, pedestrians being struck and killed at the crosswalks, vehicle crash that took the life of a child. And these are things that, as we progress as a city, that we need to take in consideration when projects and other issues come before us. I was pleased to have a conversation with our mayor, who already had started the conversation about improvements throughout our city to protect our pedestrians and our visitors, our residents and our visitors as they visit our city, and those that travel through our city. So, it's just something that we need to keep in mind, and I'm excited to be able to work with the mayor on that, as well as with key staff members of our city, so that we keep our residents and visitors safe each time that they come to our city and they travel through our city. Those are my comments. If there's no further comments from any of the other commissioners, we'll go ahead and move to item I, Community Development Staff Updates. Mr. Kovitz.
Chair Chavez and members of the committee, thank you. Or members of the commission, my apologies. Commissioner Nash stole a little bit of my thunder. I was going to share that the city of Oxnard and the county are jointly hosting a virtual sequoscoping meeting for the Santa Clara River levee number 1. That joint meeting is happening a week from today, on the 22nd at 6 p.m. Following this meeting, I'll go ahead and I'll forward the flyer to all of you. And it has the self-registration information on it for that meeting. It's a Zoom meeting, so you'll be very familiar with it. And feel free to forward that off to whichever individuals and or organizations you think would be appropriate. So it should be an interesting scoping meeting. Scoping meetings too, just to kind of put that in context, what does that mean? That's essentially, it means the environmental document has not yet been written. And these are comments that members of the public can provide to staff. The county's taking the lead on this, to county staff about what we collectively believe should be in that environmental document. So it's not a decision-making point at all, but it's an early influence point, if you will, for things that should be considered. So that's great. One of the other things that I would like to do every once in a while is just to give the commission a quick summary of what's going on in the community in terms of number of units potentially being constructed. I don't do this very often, so just wanted to give you some round numbers because I have them. So citywide, there's a total of 886 residential units that are currently under construction, which is a good number. A chunk of those come from Wagon Wheel, but they're spread out throughout the city. In terms of approved projects, there's a total of 970 units which have been approved citywide. And then if we look down in terms of just the total number of applications that we have right now that the planning department is processing, we're at, using round numbers, about 1,200 units that are currently in the pipeline for consideration. So just wanted to share those numbers. So, rounding them, because I think that makes it easier. 900 currently under construction, just shy of 1,000 for actual approved, and 1,200 for proposed units. One of the other things I want to kind of tease out of those numbers just slightly, of the approved projects, 400 of those approximately are slated in our downtown. The Planning Commission had the ability to help out with the creation of the downtown code. And since we launched that in July of 2019, we've been able to have 5 different projects make its way through the process. And those 5 different projects collectively have just shy of 400 different units. We currently have an additional 5 projects in our downtown that are being processed right now. So while the Planning Commission does not see all of these different projects, you definitely have had a collective hand in creating the rules and regulations for some of those projects, and some of these projects definitely do come before you. So I just wanted to share that with all of you. Your efforts are definitely appreciated by staff, so thank you for making all these things possible as we both regulate and facilitate projects through the city. And then a quick note, August 5th is your next meeting. We do have one item scheduled for that one, so please know that. The item that's scheduled is your first cannabis retail project that's coming before you. So it'll be a different project for all of us, and we look forward to that conversation. So I look forward to a staff report near you in the near future. And with that, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Kolowitz. Any questions from commissioners? Vice Chair Reckham.
Thank you. I had one question in part in regards to Mr. Coates' comments and another on my own. I just feel like, I'm sorry, give me a few seconds, Mr. Chair, I'm trying to word this correctly. For the record, if a commissioner feels that there's a conflict of interest in regards to a project coming up, what is staff's formal recommendation to do? I believe an email, but I would just like to know to the letter what a commissioner should do.
Yeah, Vice Chair Awejo and members of the commission at large, if any of you ever feel like you have a conflict of some sort that's coming up, it's definitely appropriate to reach out to us, to myself, as well as Ken Rosal, to engage in that conversation, and we can help navigate those waters when it comes right down to it. There's some that are easier to determine than others. If there's a direct conflict versus something that's, well, I'll just say nebulous, or the appearance of sometimes is difficult to determine. 9 times out of 10, these conversations, you could start it with me, but most of them are probably going to end up with Ken when it really comes right down to it. So feel free to send us an email, and that you don't have to get into a lot of specific details in the email, but that'll allow us to give you a call and have the follow-up conversation.
Thank you very much. And if I could follow up, is it recommended that we state why there's a conflict of interest? And if not, can we state why there's a conflict of interest?
At the end of the day, we're going to need to collectively know why there is a conflict of interest or a perceived conflict of interest. As a commissioner would go through an ex parte communications portion or declaration, if you will. If you're going to declare that you cannot participate in an item, it's appropriate for a planning commissioner to say that I'm recusing myself from participating in the conversation because of X, Y, or Z reason. Whatever would be appropriate for that particular situation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kolowitz, for that. If the meeting actually happens in regards to the comments as you detailed, I will see what happens when it's official. Thank you very much, Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Connolly.
Just a quick clarification from staff. Thank you, staff, for that update on housing units in Oxnard. But real quick, of the 970 units that are approved, does that include the almost 900 that are already in construction, or is it an additional 970 units?
Commissioner Conley, thank you for the question. Those are additive numbers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Nash. You're muted, sir.
Boy, it's heck being an old fuddy-duddy. Mr. Klowitz, I did not receive a hard copy of this meeting's agenda packet, so I hope that I did not fall off of the mailing list by somehow.
Commissioner Nash, our apologies for that. I'll check with staff to see if we received maybe a return packet of some sort, but I believe you are on our list, but we'll double check and follow up with you after the meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any additional questions or comments? I just wanted to thank staff for their work. As already mentioned, you guys are here early in the morning and then you stay with us all the way until the end of our meeting, and even more some with the subcommittee. So staff is very much appreciated for all the work that you guys do. A lot of work that we don't visually see and the public don't visually see. But it is very much appreciated because you do help move our city, keep our city moving, development, planning, and so forth. So we appreciate all the work that city staff does. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and I'll pass it along to the team that is both here as well as not here. So thank you.
Okay, so since there's no further business before the commission, and if there's no objection to adjourning to our August 5th, 2021 meeting, that will be the pleasure of the commission. So we are adjourned. Well, we will actually be going into a recess and so that we transition into our subcommittee. So for my other commissioners, have a great night, and the public as well. Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Thank you all.
right, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of Oxnard Planning Commission Rules and Procedures Bylaw Subcommittee for Thursday, July 15, 2021. The meeting will come to order at 7:40 p.m. Per the Governor's Executive Order M-29-20, some members of the Planning Commission Bylaw Subcommittee and staff will be participating via teleconference. The public may provide comments to the Planning Commission Bylaw Subcommittee via email at planning@oxnard.org no later than 3 p.m. on the day of the meeting, or through the city's website at oxnard.org/city-meetings, or call the Planning Division office. In regards to the meetings of these bylaw subcommittee, based on the last few meetings, I believe that we can either use the raise hand feature or verbally request my attention to speak. Because the meeting is electronic, all votes, if any, will be recorded by roll call. If there is no objection, we will carry on our titles from the full Planning Commission. Madam Secretary, can we please have the roll call?
Chair Chavez,
Here.
Commissioner Connolly,
Here.
Vice Chair Rejo.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We will now move on to agenda item B. Apologize. Yes. Madam Secretary, were there any public comments?
No.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We will now go on to the section C, consent agenda. Would any of my fellow commissioners like to pull one of the items off the consent agenda? If not, we will go, I'll ask for any brief comments, any corrections, and we will then go into the approval of both the subcommittee minutes for June 17 and July 1. Seeing and hearing no objections to going into approving the consent agenda items, Madam Secretary, can we please have a roll call?
Chair Chavez,
Aye.
Commissioner Connolly,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rejo.
Aye.
Vice Chair Alejo, I'm going to jump in here for a second. Did we get someone to formally make a motion and second?
Mr. Kovitz, I kind of went with a zoomed in regards to just asking no objection to going into the motion. So I believe that falls just under unanimous consent in regards to hearing no objection. I apologize for that shortcut.
We can go ahead and honor the unanimous consent. That'll work.
Thank you. For the future, I'll make a formal motion instead to remove any confusion. Thank you for that, Mr. Kovitz. We will now go to section D, study sessions and reports. The Planning Commission Rules and Procedures Bylaw Subcommittee will review and suggest revisions to the rules and procedures of the Planning Commission and preparation of reporting its findings and recommendations to the Planning Commission by August 19, 2021. Are there any general comments or recommendations from city staff or my fellow subcommittee members in regards to this agenda item before this subcommittee goes into discussion?
Nothing from staff.
And seeing nothing from my fellow commissioners at this time, I will just make a brief intro that a memo sent from me to the subcommittee members in regards to a roadmap of what we are likely to discuss and decide upon. Again, we can change what was in the memo, but I just wanted to give a brief preview and preparation because it might be a little bit jumping back and forth because they have to do with new sections or previously discussed sections. I am going to start at what was in my memo C in regards to outlining the likely topics to be introduced at this subcommittee meeting. And I will refer all to my originally proposed amendment RA24. And at this time, I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully it will work because I have too many tabs open. And hopefully I'm picking the right one. If my fellow members could indicate that I chose the right screen of 20 that I have on my desktop.
That's great, thank you.
Okay. It appears correct. Obviously, we will change it if needed. Okay. So again, I will refer all to my originally proposed Amendment 24. I'd just like to state 24 and 25 could be termed more symbolic. 26 and 27 are more substantive. So 24, I am proposing an official title to the city of Oxnard. I'll read it since it's one sentence only. The official title of this commission shall be Planning Commission of the city of Oxnard, California. And it would go at the very beginning, becoming the new Rule 1. I am in favor of this amendment or this addition. What's the pleasure of my fellow subcommittee members?
I think that's a great addition, just for clarity. If any other city or institution wants to use our notes, it would be good to have that clarification.
Thank you, Commissioner Connolly. I'm trying to copy and paste at this time.
And Vice Chair,
Excuse any typos or format differences. We're just voting or at least discussing on content. I imagine we'll be discussing style later.
and Vice Chair Alejo, staff just wanted to pop in here for a quick second.
Yes, please.
We're not intending to track like individual votes, if you will, on each small edit. It would be our intent that there's one vote essentially that we capture at the end of this, given the way that the conversations have occurred so far with the subcommittee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Kolwitz. Yes, and I forgot to reiterate that officially, if there's no objection, we will continue under informal consideration for both my fellow members and staff. My intention is that one of us will make a motion on the entire draft, and we can formally go through that at this or following meeting. I'm trying to pick out a color for this time, and I'm randomly choosing orange for my live edits for this meeting. If there are no further comments, we will move to my original proposal amendment RA25 in regards to a preface. I realize that this is quite wordy, but in doing a quick review of other planning commission bylaws, there was from a brief to a lengthy description of what the planning commission does, obviously separate from what's on the website or in the actual city municipal code book. And so obviously I'm in favor of this proposal, and I look for comments from my fellow members.
I just had a quick question for staff. Are our bylaws published for the public or just by request?
Yeah, they're definitely a public record. I don't believe that the current version of the bylaws are explicitly posted online, they could be. That's an easy thing for us to do. But if anyone would ask for it, it would be something that instantaneously we'd be able to provide to the public.
So then on Vice Chair Rejo's note, these bylaws would be shared with any commissioner or potential commissioner as they came in. So I think a preface would clarify the goals and make the document a little bit more user-friendly for sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Connolly. So I have copied and pasted, and if there is no objection, we will go into my proposed amendment 26. This is to formalize or clarify what an attendance or sufficient attendance is needed. I believe that there are no strict or any rules in regard to attendance, and it could appear arbitrary whether excused or not excused, and whether a sufficient number of meetings was attended to sufficiently represent the city in regards to the matters in front of the Planning Commission. And so I believe this will prevent any accusations of unfairness, and that we have something more formulaic to look to. And I propose this at this time after meetings, or I apologize, yes, after the meeting and hearing procedures of what's currently Rule 3 in Chair Chavez's draft that I'm live editing now.
Vice Chair.
Yes, Chair Chavez.
And staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe all citizen advisory groups already have a set of attendance rules and policies that was established when we switched over to a district selection process. Staff, can you chime in about that?
I actually don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, but we're looking that up as we speak in the Oxnard City Code.
Okay, thank you. So Vice Chair, if something already exists and I understand your reasoning behind it, I just wouldn't want to duplicate something that's already kind of set in an outline for all citizen advisory groups. Again, I believe it was something that was already determined, but I may be incorrect about that. So I appreciate staff looking to see if it was or not. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Chair Chavez. And I tend to agree with you that I didn't see one, but obviously if there was, I am going to agree with your recommendation to pull that proposal. And so if it's not too much, I'm going to ask staff to briefly search for it. Vice
Chair, I think we have your answer.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, I'm sorry, who is speaking?
This is Assistant City Attorney Paul Early.
Yes, I
Still here.
apologize. Yes, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you, Assistant City Attorney Early. Please go on.
So there is a provision in the Oxnard City Code that is section 2-33, which sets forth attendance rules for citizen advisory groups, stating that if there are 3 or more consecutive unexcused absences, or for excused for more than half the meetings in a calendar year, they will have been deemed to have been resigned. So there is an automatic resignation due to absences from a citizen advisory group already in the city code.
Thank you for that, Assistant City Attorney Early. At this time, I am going to reject my recommendation to add in my original proposed
Vice Chair Rejo, I would
6.
recommend just to note it in there per City of Oxnard CAG groups, like attendance records, you know, like put C attendance records somewhere in there.
Okay. I think that's a good recommendation. If there's no objection from Chair Chavez, we will insert and wordsmith that somewhere appropriate.
Okay, with that, if we could just have staff repeat that code section so that it is there, so when we input it.
Note that, yeah, note the code section and copy paste when you have a chance.
With Commissioner Connolly's and Chair Chavez's recommendation, staff, can you please repeat the code in section? I have 2-33. Is that correct?
That is correct, 2-33.
Thank you. And I intend to note in another memo where I put it, just so we can look at and move it around if needed at the next one. But I believe that'll be a little bit easier to vote on. And so I'm not going to wordsmith it right now at this moment, unless we decide otherwise later at the end of this meeting. We will now move on to proposed amendment 27 in regards to a tie vote, which I will put right before Rule 5 if we do agree. The reason for having this is that in general, it allows the likelihood that we can get to a conclusion, whether approval or denial, that's more satisfactory, or that is less about a tie vote and more about a majority of the commission. And so I have several exceptions and circumstances or examples to allow for a tie vote. And so I am looking to my fellow members in regards to inserting those provisions in regards to a tie vote. And I can summarize if I don't see any comment, just to give yourselves a few seconds of thought.
My recommendation would be, like in the case of a tie vote, obviously would be that one or more members are unpresent or not present for the vote. So just to table that vote until we have members present to make it not tie.
I also want to say that the Brown Act kind of covers this section. So I may be wrong, but many of these procedures that are being proposed, the Brown Act does kind of cover in instances where there's not enough members in terms of a quorum to be able to take any action on any items, and that items automatically get moved to the next meeting date. If I recall correctly, has been a couple of items in past times where it just got continued to our next meeting because a quorum of that body from the previous meeting wasn't there. And this is directly related to approval of the minutes. So I don't see a reason to add this. Again, I think the Brown Act kind of covers our procedures for this, but I'll look to staff if I'm not relaying that correct.
Thank you. Before staff comments, to Chair Chavez's comments, I just to have a distinction, I believe that you were talking about quorum, but I'm only talking about tie vote. I don't know if that changes your recommendation. In regards to these sections, I did get them, although some of them were older than 5 years from other planning commissions. And so it appeared to me that the city of Oxnard would benefit from it, but I will also agree with you and in regards to looking to legal, if the Brown Act does already cover in regards to tie votes and different procedures, so that there isn't a tie vote on a motion.
I'll just say, Vice Chair, that based off of what I'm seeing, your proposal, in a way, it kind of does tie into the quorum and the ability to actually take action on any of those items. If we recall Commissioner Connolly's first meeting, there was a tie vote and selection of the chair. And that item just ended up dying and getting pushed to our next meeting. So again, that either that's Robert's Rules of Order or that's the Brown Act, but it's always been my understanding that, you know, I don't think there's really a tie vote, and I think there's already a process in place if there is a tie vote. So again, I'll look to staff for their recommendation or their comments on it, but I don't believe this section is absolutely necessary.
Thank you, Chair Chavez, and I will look to staff for any comments that you may have at this time.
This is Assistant City Attorney Paul Early again. I would concur with Chair Chavez that the Brown Act does address much of this, and that we can't really do anything that would be contrary to the Brown Act. So specifically with respect to a tie vote, the Brown Act considers that a failed vote. If this commission wanted to put in place specific procedures that would happen under various circumstances, depending on the number of voters that were here, I suppose that's something you could do. But I could, off the top of my head, think there's going to be a lot of permutations to that and a lot of unneeded complexity on something that is typically dealt with on a item by item basis when those situations arise.
Thank you very much. If there's no objection from my fellow members, I'm going to retract this rule untitled. Although I'd like to say for the record that I would recommend something, but not at this time when we're making extremely, and we're overhauling the entire thing. And I don't believe we need to go into tie vote minutia at this moment. Seeing and hearing Commissioner Connolly.
Just put it under parliamentary procedure. I forget what rule that is, and then just refer to the Brown Act. Would that make it clear? So that would be Rule 12. I mean, actually, I don't even think it needs clarification after rereading because it's pretty clear.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna actually say that my comments would be that I would recommend that we not put it, and that it appears that the Brown Act is clear enough on that, and that we don't have to refer to the Brown Act in our bylaws. So I'll go with what I feel is unanimous and remove that for now.
I'm gonna highlight real quick. Sorry, guys.
Thank you. The subcommittee will stand at ease for 2 minutes or until Commissioner Connolly. Oh, okay, you're back, Commissioner Connolly. Thank you. Referring back to my previously distributed memo, I will now go to section D for topics likely to be revisited. And I will just go in order of the rules as drafted originally by Chair Chavez. And we will go to Rule 3. I have not renumbered all the rules. So what is now known as Rule 3, Section Consent Agenda, Part A. Here we go. Apologies. And to provide a brief preview of 9A and 9B. 9A, I propose that members not present are recommended to abstain, which is a little bit stronger than may choose as it's currently written. And 9B just removes any reference to members not being present and having it up to them. So I'm basically proposing a stronger or an elimination of any comment in regards to members not being present. Or obviously we can keep it as is, or keep it with Chair Chavez's draft as it currently stands. In my opinion, I recommend 9A, if not 9B. And then if not, I will retract and look into my fellow members for comment at this time.
Vice Chair, just real quick, and I kind of looked to Mr. Colwitz. There was a couple of times in regards to approval of minutes that if commissioners had reviewed the previous meeting, that they were allowed to vote on those meeting minutes. But again, I kind of turned to Mr. Colwitz for clarification on that.
Chair Chavez, your memory is correct. We have allowed that. The members just simply couldn't participate in deliberations, if you will.
Thank you, Mr. Colwitz. I don't know what it is with the Brown Act, but I know parliamentary-wise, although it appears that Measure M won't be a consideration, but if we are being recommended to follow it, I have in other organizations voted for minutes if it had been reviewed by yourself, but that's up to each member. And so, again, I look to the members to implement 9A, 9B, or I'll retract and looking for further comment. My preference is to have 9A for recommendation, but that's up to us.
I would just say, just to keep it as is and not have 9A and B, but that's my recommendation.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. Commissioner Conley, I'll just have you be the tiebreaker just in terms of putting it into draft. Obviously, we can revisit amending it when we make a formal motion later.
I mean, I feel like it reads well as it is, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Conley, and we will retract 9A and 9B at this time. I will now go to Rule 3, section on adjournment. Where are we? In regard to setting an end time. Right now, it's currently 11 p.m. Proposals were put for 10 and 10:30. All three of us proposed different ones. And so at this time, I will entertain, well, I'll look to my fellow members before I make my preference known.
Vice Chair, I'll just say that I agree with Commissioner Conley when we first took up this item, that the start time had moved up, but the end time didn't. So I would actually side with Commissioner Conley and move our end time to 10 p.m. And then, of course, have the options to extend the meeting past 10 if need be.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. Commissioner Conley, I believe that you proposed 10 p.m. Do you stand by that?
I do. And then with going to 11 p.m. last time, I don't know if we should put a note in there about subcommittees till 11. Obviously, we got a lot of work done till 11 p.m. But as we discussed with staff, it was a lot on us, and it was definitely a lot on staff that worked a full day, and I'm sure all of us work a full day as well. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Conley. I'll go to your first part of your comments and say I agree with the 10 p.m. and I was actually going to favor that. So I'm glad we're actually all in agreement there. In regards to your second, stating something about the subcommittee, I am going to not agree with that because I believe, in my opinion, that subcommittee subcommittees are sufficiently covered by whatever bylaws are going to be adopted. But obviously I'll go to the preference of the majority of the subcommittee at this time.
I would just say, because I believe we do have a section that does state that the subcommittees will follow the rules and procedures of the regular planning commission. So I don't think we need to add additional language specifically for subcommittees, as subcommittees aren't really a common practice for the planning commission.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. And I'm seeing that's majority of the subcommittee. Obviously, doesn't prevent you, Commissioner Conley, to bring that up again at the formal motion or at the full planning commission. We will now go to Rule 4, section on public hearing procedure, Part A, Subpart C, wordsmithing the applicant and participants. And I apologize. I know that we got notes from staff in regards to that. I did request, for the record, some proposal from staff in regards to how we can wordsmith it. It wasn't done before the memo was sent to everyone. But I will copy and paste it at this time, and I'm hopeful it's not too overbearing for us to look at it. And Mr. Kowitz, I don't know if you had any comments or objections to me just copying and pasting the content of what you put as a suggestion for public hearing procedure.
Vice Chair Alejo, no objections whatsoever.
Thank you. So as I copy and paste, the formatting got weird. I'd like to state that it doesn't right now conform to our formatting and content of what we have in the public hearing procedures, but I'd like to note that we did ask for appeal hearing specifics. And so I will just have us look at the highlighted portions, and at this time to give the chair flexibility to add in the best fashion possible the highlighted portions. I don't know what I'm thinking right now.
Vice Chair, I think you can actually remove the top portion up to 44, I think the number, just because I think that's part of a regular hearing.
Thank you for that recommendation. Thank you. As both of you are still thinking and looking at it, since it's your first time, I believe it just adds sections to indicate appellant, to give the appellant a presentation, a Q&A with the appellant, and to give them a rebuttal at near the end, and for questions to include the appellant when questions are being made. And so I would propose that you give me time until the next meeting and give me the authority to put that where appropriate in either a separate section B or to put it within section A somehow. I'm looking for comments right now from my fellow members as I give it.
I feel like there's a way that it could fit into section A. I just, I don't have like a organized way to articulate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Conley. I'll ask Chair Chavez's comments if he is preferring, if you agree, just with the appellant language to integrate it into a section A, or to have a separate section B of just appeal here.
I would actually recommend that it stays separate, as they're two different there are essentially two different scripts that we're following. Even though there's only slight changes in language, but I think it would be important to keep them separate so that we know how a regular meeting is ran versus an appeals meeting.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. Before I make my preference known, I'd like to ask because we're talking about either copying Section A and making a new Section A, or B, or integrating the appellate language into Section A, would we like to change any of the language in Section A as it currently stands?
I would add its participants.
What subpart are you looking at, Commissioner?
AC. And it's
okay, since we parenthesized it.
Yeah, we started to go back to.
I am going to add either staff or relevant staff. No, I won't, because I believe staff will do that when they make a brief presentation. Well, that's my preference to leave it out. And in general, I just wanted to state that the changes that Chair Chavez made were slight from the previous, but I believe making sure that presentation is made by the applicant before commissioners have questions is the best. And I believe that his removal of adding that extra step, because sometimes commission questions are answered by presentation is made. So in general, I believe that the language as it stands should stay. And if there are no further comments on Section A, I am going to prefer having a separate section for appeals of a Part B fashion on Part A. And if there's no objection, I'll wordsmith that and put it in a memo when we look at it again at our next subcommittee meeting.
No objection.
Yeah, no objection.
Thank you. If there's no further comments on this, we'll go to Rule 4. Oh, we already discussed appeal hearing. So apologies for doing both sections at the same time. And now we will go to Rule 9. Part A, and decide on recommended or expected. I forgot who added or changed these, and I might have been one of them, but I'll look to my fellow members before I make my preference.
I would just like to say that because the planning commission is held to a higher standard than all the other CAGs, that we try to stay as much in line with what the city council does. So I would ask staff as to, because I know the city council has to have a conduct for themselves while on the dais. So if they have the language for that, it would be interesting. But ultimately, I think it would be expected, not recommended, expected while on the dais, that you should be respectful of everybody and their time. Whether they're presenting public applicants, staff, fellow commissioners, you should be expected at all times to be respectful and engaged.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I look to you, Commissioner Conley, if you have any comments.
I agree. I feel like I was more weighted towards expected as a word that should be put in there. So I agree. Those were great words, Chair Chavez.
Thank you, Commissioner Conley. I was actually leaning towards recommended, but obviously I'll go with the majority and have expected. Thank you. And now last one, Rule 9, Part C, discuss electronic. I'll look to my fellow members before my own comments. And we were trying to discuss electronic, how specific, how, well, anything in regards to electronic, to have it or not, and more detailed or not.
So I was thinking about this one. Based off of the training that I received at the League of California Cities for the Planning Commission Academy a couple of years ago, the biggest concern was mobile devices. As we see our city council members, when we were in person, they have their tablets in front of them. Of course, those are city issued, but there are some individuals that feel more comfortable using a tablet as opposed to having a whole binder of documents with them as they're entering into the council chambers. So I would actually recommend that instead of saying electronic, that we just put mobile devices, you know, and allow the door to be open if some person prefers to use like a tablet or an iPad.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. Commissioner Connolly, I'm sorry, before you speak, Commissioner Connolly, I'm just gonna add mobile just to put it in view. And Commissioner Connolly, please go ahead.
I've been thinking about this in the last couple weeks as well, and I don't know. It's kind of dated conversation, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I would recommend putting the verbiage, honestly.
Thank you, Commissioner Connolly, and that's quite all right. I was trying to do my own research in the various mass meetings and organizations I've been in, and they've been all over the map. Not to make it a little bit more complicated, and definitely not opposed to Chair Chavez's recommendation, but my recommendation is putting personal electronic devices.
That as well.
So obviously I don't know if I'm making that more or less complicated, but and so I'm gonna pause while we deliberate on our own, because that's the last thing I have on my memo that I outlined. And so,
so just to go
at
back,
this time of, yes, Commissioner Connolly.
just to go back one step on B, I feel like we should follow the same verbiage to say members are expected to be actively engaged instead of should.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Connolly. I am going, Chair Chavez, do you have any comments?
I have no objection to that. I think it's appropriate.
Thank you, Chair Chavez, and I have no objections, and that sounds good as I type incorrectly. Members are expected to.
And then same with C, members are expected to not engage, just so the wording is similar all the way down.
Should we continue on and go to D and add that? Should we add expected to all statements now that I see that? And I'm neutral on whether or not we need to.
I don't see an issue with it, but I would like to hear staff's recommendations or comments, if any, about using the word expected throughout this entire section, and to also get their feedback in regards to the electronic mobile device debate that we're having.
Sorry. Go on, Chair Chavez. I apologize. Please go on.
Chair Chavez, you asked for staff to chime in here. There's no objection to what you're proposing here. The word expected is strong. It's not shall, so it's stopping short of that. So I think it's okay. Whether or not there's the discussion about personal electronic mobile devices or not, that's okay. The whole notion of conversations, those can be verbal or electronic. So it's possible the word conversations covers it, but there's no harm to add personal electronic mobile devices in here as well. So it's the pleasure of the subcommittee is ultimately what we would say.
I appreciate that, Mr. Kolowitz. I would just say again to my fellow committee members that there are individuals that prefer to use a tablet. You know, it's my thought process that once we get back to in person to use a tablet, but I feel like this could potentially hinder that option. It has also been a thought process that to not receive the hard copies from staff anymore, just so that we cut back on the number of papers that are put out for us. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. Commissioner Connolly, I'm going to look to you for comments before I make my own on
I'm definitely
anything.
torn. Yeah, I'm definitely torn too, because I feel like we're in a space of change from being at home to being in person and then relying on our tablets. So I don't know. I'm definitely torn on this Rule 9 too, because I feel like we're in a place of change.
Thank you, Commissioner Connolly. Just to clarify, Chair Chavez, what was your preference to make it starting or be on mobile devices or be on electronic mobile devices? Although, as I say that, well, what was your preference to wordsmith it as?
So it was just the mobile devices, or you can put personal mobile device. I just refer back to the League of California City and the training that was given in regards to the Brown Act of, you know, the LA City Council was used as an example of being on their mobile devices during a public hearing. So that's why devices were put into this section. So preference would be that mobile devices not be used or engage in side conversations and not have personal electronics, so that if an individual does choose to have a tablet with them versus having the hard copy on the dais, that they wouldn't be penalized for doing so.
Okay, thank you, Chair Chavez. If I'm hearing you correctly, then it would be or be on mobile devices while on the dais. Did I hear you correctly, Chair Chavez?
That's correct.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I'm sorry to go back to you, Commissioner Conley, but I am neutral as you are. And if there's no objection from you, I am going to go with Chair Chavez's suggestion and have it be or be on mobile devices while on the dais. Sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Conley.
I was going to say to not engage in side conversations on electronic devices, because what's to say in the future if we are not expected to bring our then tablets to meetings instead of our packets? So possibly at the beginning of the meeting, everyone turns off their notifications and then is expected to not engage in side conversations. Does that make sense?
Commissioner Conley, just can you clarify what would you like to change on that first part of Part C?
Are not expected to engage in side conversations, which is great, or to be on personal electronic mobile devices. So I know most of the time in Zoom meetings, I have my printed copy and I have my iPad next to me with my updated notes from staff as they've come in throughout the week that aren't updated in our printed packet. So I've never been in person, so I'm not sure if we get printed copies of that or if that's going to be something that changes going forward. I think it's just a conversation to have it be a little bit more broad.
Thank you, Commissioner Connolly. In general, I'd like to make it as you know what? I will make comments at this time. I'm going to ask staff, although I have a feeling you're going to say it's the subcommittee's pleasure, but I'll ask staff at this time while I come up with my own thoughts. Hearing none from staff, I guess it's up to me to decide whether we're going to have that. I'll go with Commissioner Connolly's preference to add or to and personal to make it or to be on personal mobile devices on the dais. And that's the pleasure of the majority right now.
Vice Chair, I'll just a quick comment in regards to Commissioner Connolly that staff does provide any additional documents when we were in person. So commissioners did have that for the most part, well, for the majority of the time. Staff is very quick about sending out information and, you know, distributing it to the public as well, so that there is full transparency with all communications or additional documents that come in. So I'll just leave it at that, and, you know, we'll see what the majority when we present it to the full body.
That's great information. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair Chavez and Commissioner Connolly. If there is no objection, I would like to briefly go over the corrections or additions I made in section B. And I'd just like to ask if you had any qualms or objections to how I wordsmith it. Looking at Rule 5, I believe looking at Rule 5, section on written communications from the public, Part A, in regards to the purple that I added since the last meeting, just the purple, I realized that my what I added was more like a section colon whatever the procedure or the restriction is. But it appears that most, if not all, of the rules as it stands are in sentence format. And so if there is no objection, I'm going to change it to sentence format when I send it out as a memo before the next meeting, unless both of you would like it to stand as is. Oh, I'm sorry. Chair Chavez or Commissioner Connolly? Any comments? So I'd like to note on Part A, Subpart C, Subpart I, in the form or the text given to me or sent to us by Mr. Kowitz, it stated 4 days prior, and I didn't want to assume, because the City of Ventura Planning Commission meetings happen on Tuesday, 4 days before would be Friday. I do realize that we wanted to keep in as close to Ventura, or that's what we all decided. However, since our meeting falls on a Thursday, it's the pleasure of the subcommittee to make it 3 days prior so that it's on a Monday, or 6 days prior so that it's on a Friday. Just in regard to the page limitation, the 5 pages maximum, including exhibits.
So Chair, just real quick, to your first point, I think it would be fine just to keep the format in the way that it is. And I would agree that we do 3 days. So, you know, just to have that Monday. Just because of the fact that we, depending on the Friday, city government is closed on every rotating Friday. So I think if we do 3 days, I think it would put us in a good, safe zone.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. Commissioner Connolly.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, and I agree too. So we will make that 3 days. At this time, I believe that we have discussed every item that was originally proposed by Chair Chavez, myself, and Commissioner Connolly over the last, I want to say, 3 meetings and countless hours. I would ask, if there's no objection, that we stand at ease for a couple of minutes as I send this out to both of you and staff electronically.
Vice
Or
Chair,
if it's the pleasure of the subcommittee to wait and to have it seen in a memo before we make any formal motions on it. Yes, Mr. Kolowitz, please
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
Just one quick question. As we're reading the text and the page limitations,
Yes.
we're wondering if there's a gap that's created. We have 3 days prior to the meeting, and then we have day of the meeting. But if someone was submitting something 2 days before the meeting, I'm just wondering if there's some language that we could play with here slightly. And it's possible. Well,
Thank you, Mr. Kolowitz.
and a potential fix would be less than 3 days of the meeting, or to the meeting. So, yeah, instead of day of, or you could add another Roman numeral to have 2 days prior to the meeting if you want to go down that way. This is all to the pleasure of the subcommittee.
Of course, Mr. Kolowitz. Can you repeat what your first option was, please?
Essentially on Roman C, Roman numeral 2, it would say less than 3 days to meeting. Yeah. And as we're playing with it, since we do mention time in Roman numeral 1, it could be after 5 p.m. 3 days prior. Might be another way of doing it. So still on Roman number 2.
I'm sorry, what was that, Mr. Kolowitz? And then obviously subcommittee members will discuss all of these changes right after. I'm just want to have these for discussion.
Of course.
I'm sorry, repeat. Yeah.
So after 5 p.m., 3 days prior to meeting. Essentially, we're trying to make it a very linear path.
Thank you, Mr. Kolowitz. I am going to ask my fellow subcommittee members your comments on Mr. Kolowitz's suggestions at this time.
No objection to staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Chair Chavez.
Agreed, no objection. I'm trying to think of words to make it clear, but it's pretty straightforward reading it again, honestly.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will.
Vice Chair Alejo, I'm going to jump in here again because I think we actually just modified the incorrect line. So where we were thinking the after 5 p.m. 3 days prior to the meeting was going to go was not as part of Roman numeral I, but replacing the orange text at the start of Roman numeral 2. And that way, if we left what had been there, essentially, it's anything that would be submitted to the planning commission staff, going to the planning commission more than 3 days ahead of the meeting would be the 5 pages. And then after we cross that 5 p.m. threshold, then it would be limited to 1 page maximum. Okay. I think that's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Colwitz. Fellow subcommittee members, do we have any objections to the changes I rapidly made?
Uh, Vice Chair, just for clarification, because now it looks like 1 and 2 are the same. So the first one says 3 days prior to the meeting by 5 p.m., 5 pages maximum, including the exhibits. After 5 p.m., 3 days prior to the meeting, 1 page maximum, including exhibits. To me, it sounds like they're both the same. They're just worded different. I believe we need to have something that says less than the 3 days, because originally that one was a day before or the day of, if I recall correctly.
Thank you, Chair Chavez.
If you want staff to hop in here with maybe some more wordsmithing, perhaps, it could be between 3 days prior to the meeting at 5 p.m. to the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Colwitz, for those suggestions. I bring it back to the subcommittee. And my comments are that I'm in general agreement with the changes we made.
I'm just trying to play with it in my head on CI. Up to 3 days prior to meeting, 5 pages maximum, or up to 5 pages maximum. If less than, I don't know how to say it, or beyond that. I'm just trying to think out loud. My apologies.
I just want to state my preference that we will vote on this formally at the next meeting, so we can give us, now it's 3 weeks before, to think about it a little bit more. But the intention by myself is that this draft, removing all strike-throughs and color, is submitted back to the subcommittee, and we can do a formal mission to approve it for report to the full planning commission, and obviously go amend it through again. So that I feel it shouldn't give us pause if we need to wordsmith it in the next 3 weeks in our minds or at the next meeting.
I agree. Thank you.
No objection.
Thank you, both subcommittee members. I'm sorry, did I see some consternation from the council chambers?
Nope, just discussion. We're just going over different variations of a theme.
Apologies. I got a little bit more stressed about that than I should have. Okay. You know, at this time, I am going to ask that we stand at ease while I electronically send this to Chair Chavez, Commissioner Connolly, and I believe I have the emails for Mr. Colwitz. And I'm sorry I don't have it for Secretary Jessica and Assistant City Attorney Early. I would just like to give us a few minutes in case we need to look at any time-sensitive or urgent changes, updates, or any comments before the next meeting, so that we can make the next meeting our last meeting. So I will ask for comments from anyone at this time while I try to get this out to all of you, or in preparation to get it out to all of you.
There was just one thing that wasn't clarified, and I feel like it should go under election and duties of officers, is the term limits, and saying that it's a 4-year term. And then under like 28 or Rule 6F that we almost admitted, I think when it says annual election, that should be clarified if it's every 4 years or if it's in January or March, or I think that should be clarified too, because the term limits are really, they're not discussed. Or term expectations, my apologies.
Thank you, Commissioner Connolly. Yes, Chair Chavez.
I think we did have a conversation in regards to this, that if vacancies occur on the planning commission, that it's not typically set in stone when a commissioner would be appointed. Mm-hmm. So there's, I think it would be.
We did discuss that, but we put if a vacancy occurs prior to the next annual election. So I just put in my notes to clarify when to define annual election.
Well, it's either at the beginning of the year or.
Yeah, my apologies, we did.
So I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah.
And then Vice Chair, just for sakes of transparency, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it would be appropriate to hold off sending those the bylaws right now and just save it for our next meeting. That would just be my recommendation. And, you know, as we already got approval by the majority of the planning commission to take that extra meeting date, that we would be well within our limits. But that would be my recommendation, that we just hold off sending electronically so that so that the public has the opportunity also to receive that, to have that documents in their hands. Again, if I'm wrong, I ask staff to correct me, but that would be my recommendation, that we just hold off, and if there's no further business, move towards adjournment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Chavez, and I will ask staff to answer Chair Chavez's question.
Yeah, this is Scott Kolowitz. I'm not going to say right or wrong at this point in time, but one of the things that we have been doing is following each one of these meetings, we've been collecting an electronic copy as has been discussed at that meeting, just for our records. But what we would expect for the next meeting basically is the cleaned up version, if you will. So staff, just keeping with past practice, if it's possible to send at least a copy to staff, just so we have it, that would be great. But again, it's not right or wrong.
And I would ask that you send anything that you're sending out to staff to Ken Rozelle instead of me. I had the honor to sit in today for this, but he'll be continuing with this in the future.
Are you pretty sure about that? We would love to have you still on the email conversations, but I'll go with your recommendation and get Ken Rozelle a good welcome back from vacation gift in regards to that. I am going to look again to staff or my fellow subcommittee meetings before I go into my final comments and adjournment. I'll start with staff first and then subcommittee members.
Staff actually does have one small comment related to a comment that the subcommittee made earlier today. Under Rule 11, that's where subcommittees are discussed. It talks about how subcommittees could be created, but we didn't see anywhere else in the bylaws that talks about the subcommittee abiding by the same rules as the full planning commission. So if that is not in there, we did not see it. So if it's not in there, maybe a part B could be the subcommittees would be expected to follow the rules of the full planning commission, something to that effect.
Thank you, Mr. Kolowitz. Comments by my fellow subcommittee members.
That's appropriate. And real quick, Vice Chair Rejo, are you going to be writing up these notes and concluding, drafting a final document to all of us and everyone else, or would staff do that? I believe you are, correct?
Commissioner Conley, yeah, I will do that and let staff not have to do that. What I'm planning to do is I'm going to submit both the dirty version of the bylaws as it currently stands, or as you see them right now, and the cleaned up version. I have a feeling I'm gonna make some, I don't wanna say stylistic, but I'm gonna have to make some executive decisions, like I'll renumber the rules. So small stuff like that, but I intend to make it clear which ones that I made a quick decision on before we go into the full motion. And if I have no objection, I believe that will clarify any confusion in regards to everything.
Agreed. I think there's some formatting challenges just in our draft when it says like rule number and then rule A and then it's A again. So it needs to, you know, A1I, you know how it goes.
Yeah.
Vice Chair, just real quick.
Chair Chavez.
For the Rule 1, Section C, it says this was something that was added, that each subcommittee is part of the commission and is subject to the commission's authority and direction and its rules. So there's technically language already in there.
Okay, thank you for that, Chair Chavez.
Of course, we can always relocate that part into the subcommittee section, but that was just under the general provisions that it actually is already there, unless staff had another take on language.
As we were scanning the minutes, the bylaws, I think that didn't pop out to us. So we're fine with it in either location. So it's up to all of you.
Thank you, Chair Chavez, for filing that in quick fashion. I'll look to the subcommittee members whether we keep it in Rule 1C or move it to Rule 11.
I'm okay with either way. There's no preference on that.
Thank you. Commissioner Connolly.
I like to be as clear as possible, so I would love to put in Rule 11B, refer back to 1A, or as stated in Rule 1A, my apologies.
Thank you, Commissioner Conley. My preference is not to refer back to Rule 1C in Rule 11B in regards to that. So I'm leaving it up to Chair Chavez to tie break at this moment. And the decision is keep 1C or have something in 11B referring to 1C.
Instead of adding additional language to refer here, refer there, I think it would be appropriate just to move 1C to 11 and become the new 11B. I think that would be the appropriate action.
Thank you. Is there any objection from Commissioner Conley? With that, I'm going to move now. Commissioner Conley.
No, I totally agree. I think that's a great way to make it really clear.
I'm just going to strike that through for us. And
it's a better home for those words.
Thank you very much. I'll look to my fellow subcommittee members with any further comments before I go into mine and adjournment.
Vice Chair, I would just make a couple that I appreciate. One, the work that you both are contributing to this. Appreciate staff's input as well. I believe this document now, it has a little bit more teeth compared to the one that we have now. There's a lot more details, so there's no opportunities for people to say I was not aware of what was going on. So I'm very happy with what we have so far, and as we present it to the full commission, I think we'll get additional feedback and more suggestions to change, and I think overall it's going to make the commission a lot stronger. So thank you all for your hard work, as well as our staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Chavez, for your comments. Commissioner Connolly.
I agree. Thank you both and everyone for your hard work. I think this is going to benefit the entire commission and be a working document going forward for a very long time.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Connolly. I'll go with a couple of housekeeping, my intentions, personal something, and then adjournment. And so, again, my intention is to send a memo out with the quote unquote dirty version and the clean version to all those concerned in regards to the subcommittee, which would include both Chair Chavez and Commissioner Conway. And if I'm not mistaken, it was Assistant City Attorney Ken Roselle, Mr. Scott Kowitz, and I assume I'm going to email it also to Secretary Dee and Jessica, unless I hear otherwise. I would also ask, and I'll put it in the memo, some possible motions that we could have. I know that in our full planning commission, we get recommended motions, but I just have a couple that I'd like to propose. I won't put my preference on it, but I'm going to ask in general that there's going to be some type of motion to approve, and that we consider by paragraph or seriatim, which if you go back to Robert's rules, it's going to be, let's see. If you excuse me for a second, if you look at section 28, I believe it will provide you with a quick summary of what my preference is. Obviously, it's up to the majority of the subcommittee, how we want to proceed on the motion, if any, made at the next subcommittee meeting. And I'd just like to personally say that, honestly, ecstatic is an understatement of how I feel in regards to this subcommittee. I definitely appreciated Chair Chavez's appointment of me, not only to be on the subcommittee, but to chair. And I take it with great pride and enthusiasm, and I hope you saw that. And hopefully it will be a short meeting again at our next subcommittee meeting. So thank you very much kindly to my fellow subcommittee members and especially staff. I apologize. I was hoping that we would go with a looser version of the Brown Act and not have to have so many people stuck with us until 11 p.m. like last time. And so I appreciate it. And 99% sure that we'll get it done at the next meeting, knock on wood.
Agreed.
If there, thanks. And if there is no objection to adjourning this subcommittee meeting, we are adjourned to the following, right following the Planning Commission meeting on August 5, 2021. Thank you kindly, fellow subcommittee members and staff. Appreciate it, and see you all in 3 weeks.
Thank you all for your time. Great
Thank
work.
you. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.